Hello there, yes it is I, the conspicuous Moo, and a slightly different format today. I wanted to talk to you today about covenants, and how we can't really tell you which covenant is best right now, the reasons for that, and just a general change of philosophy in the way that we approach covenants. So, let's get cracking. Now, one of the most common questions going into Shadowlands is, not unreasonably, what is the best covenant for my class? After all, covenants are going to be a large part of our lives in the new expansion, whether we like them or not. However, at this point in time, any indications of your best covenant is likely to be pure guesswork on everybody's part except at Blizzard. They have the future builds, and they're not telling. We are most likely past the point of additional skills and talents being designed and implemented, so what you have on live is probably what you're stuck with now for 2 years or more. Grats or otherwise, please delete as applicable. The focus has now clearly shifted towards the ever-elusive balance phase. Most of the changes in the last couple of weeks have been centered around the mythical tuning knobs, the Covenant class abilities, conduits, legendaries, and soulbinds. This is likely to be ongoing until the first couple of weeks of Castle Nathria raiding. Classes and specs on the outer edges of Sublime and Diabolical will need to be brought back into the pack, and I expect it will start to settle a little bit after that. And at the end of all of that palaver will be the meta that so many seek. But should you be seeking it? If we tumble back in time to that player power discussion between Preach and Ian Hazacostas a few months back, it was apparent to me that the design approach for covenants is that they were actively working against the concept of there being a best or meta choice for all of the many things that you can do in-game. That certainly seems to be the case with Brewmasters, whose 4 Covenant class abilities have different effects and flavours depending on what type of content you prefer doing most of the time. Is it perfect? No, not at the time of writing, and likely will never be so. However, the intent is definitely there, and it was the main thing that I took away from that excellent discussion. Ian Hazacostas' philosophy with Covenant class ability seems to be much more about making Covenants have such an impact on your character that your average Mythic Pug leader, whether raid or dungeon, will understand fully and reasonably that you cannot be expected to choose the best option for that content because of the friction involved in switching. And with no Covenant being outstanding for everything, surely you can't expect me to be optimal every time, right? Now, we could go into the sublime naivety of this kind of thinking. In a world of theory crafting, YouTube videos, Twitch streams, class discords, and guides from elite players, pug groups are always going to strive for the strongest composition to get the content done as efficiently and risk-free as possible. And they probably don't care about your individual and incorrect meta choices. But hey, that is the tide Blizzard have decided to fight against. It's no secret that I frequently disagree with the design philosophies of Ian Hazacostas and his fellow creatives at Blizzard. Creating class abilities and tying them to covenants is a terrible idea in my opinion. I heartily dislike systems upon systems of unnecessary complexity that will be impossible to balance in defiance of all of your dainty adjustment of tuning knobs. The neglect of class design for a second straight expansion and hiding it behind a few unpruned abilities of dubious value could well be very costly for subscription numbers, as it was with Battle for Azeroth. And the prospect of glacial, tightly controlled progression and artificial barriers to player agency has the immense potential to bore me and many others, I suspect, to tears. But for once, I think he's right to try and go in this direction. For far too long, we have been willing to choose the path of least resistance and find those tasty meta beans. It's natural for players to want to be the best that they can be, to not let the side down or fear rejection from pugs as a result of our own inclinations. I am as guilty as anyone else of being a frequent traveller on the meta train, but ultimately, is it really worth it? For the vast majority of players in Azeroth, myself included, the meta simply doesn't matter at all. We're not going to be hitting Mythic dungeon keys at 25+, or pushing Mythic raid progression. We're not likely to be gladiators or rated battleground champions. We're going to be logging in every day with no expectation of extraordinary greatness, and that is absolutely fine. This is the first expansion in a while where I don't feel obligated to follow where the top players indicate, and the design of the Covenant class abilities has contributed to that. I have chosen Night Fae for my Brewmaster in Shadowlands because it is the Covenant I want to join, and not because Feline Stomp is in any way remarkable across the board for my particular spec. In fact, it's probably undertuned right now, even with its recent changes. But that doesn't matter to me, because I like the armor set, and the mounts, and the queen, and the aesthetics, and I either dislike or downright despise the themes of the other Covenants. And I hope that players like me, from all the levels of raiding, Mythic Plus and PvP below the elite level, can allow themselves the possibility of making the meaningful choice that they'll get the most enjoyment from. I hope, probably against reason, that this will translate to being able to take talents that aren't the mandatory best in all circumstances, because you just prefer using them. That hybrid soulbind builds can become a thing where you won't be the bestest DPS ever, but you bring a little extra utility or healing to the table. And who knows, maybe even a little more flexibility in builds and stat priorities so you can pursue more unusual setups and try them out without being showered in scorn. The very act of introducing Covenant friction like this may well allow for some loosening of the meta bindings around our characters, particularly when pugging. This is probably where you will encounter the most resistance to your own choices, and this is a great time as players start to flock back and prepare for Shadowlands to look for a guild that suits your needs, fulfills your goals, and supports your own way of doing things. It's immensely more satisfying to be part of a community that doesn't care you took Night Fae when Necrolord is clearly better and oh my god, what are you doing, you noob? I mean, yes, your social guild where you all get naked and dance in the Stormwind Fountain for copper pieces is great larks, but if you want a heroic raid and do 15 keys and they're just into that sweet low denomination coinage and displays of public nudity, then it's probably time for a change. And please believe me, I am not a meta hater. There is definitely a place for the meta builds in World of Warcraft. It's where the best of the best confound the odds to pull off feats beyond the range of many players. And, if you're part of a collective that needs you to play a particular role, then perhaps you will need to accede to the needs of the many. I'm not advocating for your individualistic build and edgy Covenant choice to ruin the prospects of your guild's top-level progression. That just makes you a prat. However, there is a greater population of players who might enjoy the game more if they allowed themselves to make the choices they wanted and not the ones they are told to. And, if they like it, they might even stay a while. After all, this isn't an expansion that can afford to hemorrhage its player base like the last one did. We always expect a dip in numbers after the first month, but BFA took that to a whole new level. I personally believe that for most of us, the best Covenants, Specs, Classes, Soulbinds, War Mode talents, Conduits and Transmog choices are not necessarily the best choices for our own characters, and that it's absolutely okay to wend our way through Azeroth without the glare of the meta chaser upon us at all times. For me, anyway, that's a very positive start to come at the launch of Shadowlands. Alright, so there you have it. Hope you enjoyed that. Like, comment, moo, share, subscribe, and moo again, as always. And I will be back with some Brewmaster or Shadowlands news in the very near future. But until then, I am the conspicuous moo, and a very good evening to you.